everyone. This is Melissa Keller from Vineyard Worship. We are excited to announce the launch of Vineyard Worship Essentials, a comprehensive training program for Vineyard Worship leaders. Our summer cohorts are filling up now. Over 8 weeks, you'll engage in lively discussions with other worship leaders from around the world, grow together in your leadership skills, and form lasting connections. Whether you're just starting out or looking to hone your skills, Vineyard Worship Essentials is the perfect way to discover how God is calling you to this incredible ministry of leading others into worship. Visit vineyardworship.com/essentials for more information and to sign up. Join us today and take the first step in your journey.
All right, what up, everybody? Adam here. This is the Ferment podcast. Today, episode 3 of my mini-series, The Joys and Challenges of Leading Worship in All Different Kinds of Churches. And today, my guest is Kyle Howard. What up, Kyle?
What's up? How's it going, guys?
Well, Kyle, it's good to see you, even if it is on the Zooms.
Yep, always.
Today is a Wednesday. What have you been doing at church?
Well, we had some meetings. Tuesdays typically are our bigger meeting day. So, we have Sunday church, and then Mondays I'm in the office, but it's typically a little bit of a ghost town. People, they have work from home days or recovery days, whatever you want to call it.
That's right.
But then Tuesday, everybody comes in. That's when the office is the most full.
Yeah.
That's when a lot of the meetings are. But then Wednesdays, there's some staff here, or a good chunk, but less meetings, but I'm still in a handful of meetings. But I'm not on worship this weekend, so definitely have more margin.
That's good.
For emails and setting up other meetings and with, worship team members and all kinds of things. So I feel like I can do a lot more when I'm not on worship.
That's right. Does it feel good to have a week off?
It does. This will be my second week in a row, actually, which is a little more rare, but it's you definitely realize, oh man, this is what it feels like to come to church and not have, not as any responsibilities, but a big one, there's a lot more headroom for sure. It feels great.
Yeah. You just feel different. All right. Hey man, let's just jump right in this. This little series we've been doing here on the podcast is all about the different experiences and really the different gifts. That's the word I've been sort of rolling around in my head. The gifts that exist at leading worship at different sized churches.
Yeah.
And maybe even some of the challenges. And so in our first week, we talked to Derek McTavish, and Derek leads worship at a smaller church. And then last week we talked to my friend Megan, who leads worship at, I'm using air quotes here, a medium-sized church in Tehachapi. Which I realize, Megan's church, she was saying is, around, 400 to 600 people depending on the weekend. And that might be large in a lot of people's minds, especially according to the national averages. But, here in the Vineyard, we have more than a handful of churches that are in that world. And then you guys at Urbana kind of represent that larger church. So I just want to start here, Kyle. What are some of the gifts of leading worship in a larger church like you guys have at Urbana?
I would say, I think it's helpful to know I've been leading worship at Urbana for a long time, but there were a few years where we had a multi-site type setup. And so I was the worship director at that campus, and that was anywhere from 1 to 200. So there was a season where I definitely felt like I was stewarding the small church setting. So it has been interesting. I'm sure we'll get into a little bit of that too as we talk. But when I think about both, and I think about the air quotes larger church, I think some of the gifts or some of the joys that I think about, I think there's a part of it where, I've never led worship in like a stadium or anything like that.
Right.
But I think there is an element where even like the physical aspects of a room, like the one at, like the auditorium at Urbana, even just calling it an auditorium itself kind of has its own like feeling. Oh, this isn't like, we don't call it a sanctuary. We don't call it a chapel. It's like the auditorium. So even like, as you walk into our room, it's set up more for like, almost like performances or like theater type showings. Like we literally have a round curtain that can come and close the whole stage up. So there's that aspect of it at Urbana. And I think it can sometimes like feel like, oh, this is a big room kind of thing. And so, and the more you do it, obviously I don't really think like that on the regular, but I think when I think about some of the joys, the bigger the room, the more, hopefully the more the people, and I think the more people I would say hopefully the more diverse the crowd is, and you get all kinds of different people from different backgrounds, and there is where I think you encounter more and different kinds of expressions of worship, I would say.
Yeah.
And so you can't really pinpoint one voice in the crowd, I think, is kind of the thing. And you're kind of, when you're, I don't know if I want to say evaluating the engagement of worship in a big room, but you don't really evaluate it by one or two people. It's more like pockets of people. You look out and lights are in your face in a way. And so it's like, you can kind of see some hands up kind of, but you can't necessarily see if they're crying or not. So
Yeah.
all in all, I think I would just sum it up to say, I think a joy is like, you're hearing one voice, but it's like a collectively one voice. So it's kind of just like a feeling that it's like, man, this is like, it's not like heaven, but it's like a glimpse of like, man, this is like, it's when you have a ton of different voices like that come together, it just feels bigger. So I don't know. I think that's a joy, but I think for sure, just the diversity aspect of like all the different expressions of worship because like you just sometimes don't know what the heck's going on out there in the back row. And I think even it's harder to know, and this is like subjective, did that worship set land or not? Like that's kind of, I have thoughts on that, but like I could think, oh man, that flopped. But then like it could be an email the next day or people just talking to you in the commons area or the cafe or whatever. And they're like, when this happened in the worship set, and they're just like sharing this moment that they had. And you're like, I had no idea.
That's right.
And now, and like in a smaller room, it's like, it's a little easier to get a gauge on that sometimes, I feel like. So yeah, I don't know. Those are some of the gifts that come to mind, I think, if that answers that question.
Yeah, I'm hearing some of the gifts and the challenges in there. I guess I want to maybe needle out two things here. One, you were saying just the diversity that's in a room that's bigger. And that made me think, and this is maybe not even what you were saying, but it made me think of something else. One of the cool things that maybe happens at larger churches, and you can say whatever you want about this, is sometimes, and maybe this is just sociology too, but sometimes when the room is a little bigger and people know that it's going to be full, it's kind of a safe space for new people to come to church. Because you know what I mean? Like they can kind of there's a little anonymity. Now that ends up being a challenge for a bigger church, right? Because it's harder to, who's here? Who's new? How do we connect with you? But for that person who's coming into church for the first time, maybe they haven't been to church in a long time, or maybe they've had some sketchy church history, or maybe they've never been to church and they're going to try it out for the very first time. One of the things I was thinking while you were talking is, one gift is that you're offering people a little bit of squish room. There's got to be a better phrase for it, but a little bit of like, I can come and get in here and somebody's not going to be right on top of me wondering like who I am and my whole life story. And I can kind of warm up to whatever's happening. Right. I'm assuming that happens to you guys more than a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, like I even think as people on staff, and I tell my team too, I'm like, don't forget what it feels like to sit in the seats. Like I went for years. People didn't know, I came on staff when I was in high school. I was part-time, but I was helping out with the tech team. So like immediately if I was on worship on Sunday, I was helping out with tech. So I was never sitting in the seats. And I think just to kind of even hear, I've even recently in the last week, I had a meeting with a newer worship team member, and she was telling me like her experience when she was first coming to our church. And I think she had some brokenness, some things that, the Lord wanted to heal up in her and stuff. And it's been a minute since I've heard, like, we did something physically in the room where she was able to like enter into God's presence easier. And I think is what you're hitting on is like the room was bigger, more people, you can kind of just get in and out and not be seen. But she said when the lights dimmed, like for worship, it was like she felt safe and like was able to like just be just in her moment. So I think on your point, like I think you can way easier, even as a staff person, like you can kind of get in there and like feel like you're not at all in the spotlight. You're just kind of like there just to receive.
Oh yeah.
Rather than just eyes being on you in a way. So yeah, for sure.
I see that. That's good. Okay. Let me ask you this. what happens in a larger church that maybe doesn't happen in smaller or medium churches? I mean, it's kind of similar to question one, but I don't know. Maybe we could tease that apart. Is there something that happens in a church like yours that maybe doesn't happen in a church of 50 or 60? And I'm not even saying good or bad here.
Yeah. Here's something that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Thank God I wasn't on worship. I mean, when this happened, but we had our sound system just crashed on us. And there was a volunteer leading, definitely a high capacity leader, like wasn't a rookie by any means, but the sound system went out and the room's full and it's a big room. We have like a little over 1,000 seats in the room. And I was like, oh my gosh, like what the heck are we about to do? Like in the middle of the worship set. And it was one of the greatest steps of like examples of leading that I had seen. Cause I was like, I don't know if I would have thought to do this, but just came around, unplugged the acoustic, came to the very front of the stage, told the drummer to grab a cajon, and then had the whole worship team just come up to the edge of the stage and yelled out and invited everyone to come down to the front. And it's like, and didn't go with the songs they had planned, but went to like a song like How Great Is Our God, something that he was like, oh, I hope everyone knows this. And I was like, that's brilliant. So I think that came to mind because, in a smaller church, amplification isn't as much of a priority. But like when you're in a huge room like that, I think my mind goes to the technical side sometimes when, you think of something like that happening.
Yeah.
So that comes to mind.
Yeah. Part of what I hear you saying in that is sometimes in larger churches, maybe our experience of the tech grows. The sound systems are better. Let's just say it. The sound systems are better. The screens are brighter. And so we use them and it's cool. But what do we do if it implodes, right? Yeah, it's
right,
good to hear that
right.
you had somebody on stage who could handle that moment and who didn't just go with the worship set as it was planned, but chose maybe something else that included the room without the screen or the sound system.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, man, I don't even need to be here.
That's right.
Yeah, it was beautiful. And I think, something else that comes to mind is like when I think about, big room and a smaller room and those environments, I think as a leader, I think both for sure have different challenges. But in my experience with leading in a smaller room, like in the room that I used to lead in at our other campus, like it was a pretty small room, like, and the stage was really, really close to the front row.
Yeah.
And so it was almost like awkward to make eye contact, like to that point where it's like, we're worshiping, stop looking at me. Like it's that close. So I think that's for sure. Like if you're not used to that, like that can be interesting. And so I think that's something and something that I feel like I talk to my team about with being in a larger room is like, you can't gauge how the room is based on like a pocket of people hooting and hollering and clapping. Cause we kind of run into that where it's like, we think everyone in the room's engaged because these front rows are like going hard. But then there's like the people in the back and, they're like, what the heck are we doing here? Like,
right.
So it's like being really careful to not like focus in on just the one or the two that are maybe more expressionate, and actually like asking the Lord. Cause I think there's a part where it's like, you can't go off of just physical responses. You have to like, Lord, what are you doing? Holy Spirit, what are you doing in this moment? And I think, not saying it's harder in a big church, but it's just like, you literally can't go off of like physical response.
No,
so
good.
That's something else that I think that comes to mind.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, that was one of the things I was going to ask you is, what are some of the challenges? And I think you're already speaking to it. If the room is bigger and you have this row or two, or maybe this middle section and it's very, very engaged, your mind goes, oh, worship was awesome today. And maybe you didn't even see what was happening in the other sections or maybe toward the back, and maybe they're very disengaged.
Right.
What would you want to say? Let's just dig in here for a second. What would you want to say about trying to lead the whole room? Like leading past those, let's say, 50 people who are going to come and yell and clap and shout and sing harmony with you really loud? How do you lead past those people into maybe that new person we were talking about a minute ago who's never been to church or hasn't been in 10 years and is very new, doesn't know the songs, doesn't even know about worship. And then they're there and they're trying to connect with God. Talk to me about leading the whole room.
Yeah, that's such a good question. And honestly, it's something I feel like I carry the weight for that at our church, because not that other people don't care about that, but I know it's something like within the worship department, because I get a lot of people and even leaders on our team or musicians or whatever, but they're like, why don't we do all these songs? And why don't we introduce more songs, more new songs? And I just try to be have my foot in both spaces, basically, whatever the phrase is, because, there are the people like where it's just like, if they are brand new, maybe they know It Is Well. They're probably going to know Amazing Grace, whatever. But like, if you do Gyra, you do something else, and they're all kind of, it's just like, think about that group that's like in row J or whatever it is. And, how was their experience? So I think there's a lot of practical things where it's like, if you're a worship pastor, director, or you're in charge of stewarding, worship that's what you are doing, is stewarding worship for the whole room, not just for yourself or what songs your team wants to do. There's definitely that balance that you have to prayerfully consider and be constantly in, dialogue with the Holy Spirit about, and trusting your team. But then I think where it gets harder is that, there's like that the assignment of a worship leader is to, I guess you could say, lead people into the presence of Jesus, but that is one of the goals for sure. But I for sure think there's only so much you can do. You got 20 minutes or however long the set is in whatever church it is, but you can only do so much for everybody or whatever, or the person. And I think a lot of it comes to, do they know Jesus? Like, have they met Jesus, or have they encountered Jesus? Because if they haven't even done that, we have to think through what are pockets of the worship set where we are allowing those people who don't have a grid for it to where they feel comfortable, where they can like maybe let their guard down and open up their hearts to whatever, even if they don't have a grid for Holy Spirit or anything, but just to, even if you can create a space for them to let their guard down and their heart to be open to something, like even if they don't know what something is. I think that's kind of where my mind goes.
Okay, so here's what I was hearing you say in all that. I hear you say part of the way you lead the whole room begins even before you lead in the songs you choose. So you're not just going to let the most committed members of your worship community, maybe even people who are on the team playing, choose the set because they're going to want to always do the new thing that makes them excited or whatever. Right. Like, we'll add new songs, but we want to have something that's old or something that's universal or just widely known. So I hear that. That's one way to lead the room. That made me think of this. Do you ever say anything in your worship set? Like, beyond musical, beyond what we sing, is there ever a moment where you're just like, hey, maybe you're new here this morning and this is brand new to you, and I just want to encourage you to hold your hands out this morning as we just prepare. Do you do things like that? Talk to me.
I do. We definitely allow room for the Holy Spirit in our services for sure, but we do have we have a lot of things moving, and so we do have like a lot of time for worship. And we're a little bit different where we do our worship after the message. So we do about 3 songs usually. And so I'm also in the camp of like, man, we need to get into these songs and not spend 25% of the time talking. Yeah. So personally, I go back and forth on talking during worship sets. I typically am not I don't err on that side of talking, but it's such a hard thing because there are many times when I've led and I have stopped in a song, or I will be like, man, I feel like the Lord's putting this on my heart to share. And whether I miss it or not miss it, who knows if I miss it or not. It's just, you take the risk, you have the unction from the Spirit. But I typically don't say a lot, but I remember I was leading gratitude I feel like that's a decently popular song these days. I think it's on the radio. I don't listen to the radio, but I think it's on there. And I finished the song, and I just had this moment where I'm like looking at the lyrics, and I'm like, so I throw up my hands and I praise you again and again. And I just had this moment with the congregation where I'm like, I just spoke the lyrics out, and I was like, I'm reading these lyrics, I'm singing these lyrics, and we're singing it. And I think I said something like, I know some of you are actually raising your hands, but I literally talked about like, what, like, think about times in your life when you're actually lifting your hands towards something. So I tried to get it even outside of the context of worship.
Sure.
But if you're lifting your hands towards something, that's one of the most submissive, like, ways of acknowledging that there is something higher than you. And I think in that moment, I just invited people to enter into that place with Jesus. And so that's a recent example of, I would say, something, but there have been seasons, I would say, where we were more teaching on it, like a little nugget.
Yeah.
The problem is, like, you have to be good at it, and you got to kind of like, who knows how the message is landing. And it's like, sometimes you just enter right in and stuff, but I do think those can be very effective. And we used to, honestly, I forget what Dan Wilt called them, like worship nuggets type things.
He called them worship
like
bombs.
But worship bombs. Yeah. So we were doing those like for a while. And so now I would say they're just kind of sprinkled in.
Yeah. You've embodied it now. Hopefully.
Yeah.
No, I like that. I love that idea that if there's something in the song that is an action to worship, maybe not every time, but maybe sometimes it's good to just slow down in there and just invite people into it.
Yeah. And I think personally, because of COVID, and we were just talking about this earlier, but there is a whole new church too. So like, dude. I personally, it's cool that you brought this up, because I've been talking with a few people on our team, like other worship leaders, and it's almost like, in our staff too, we're talking a lot more about discipleship too right now, and putting a lot more emphasis on that. But I think in the same way, it's like, well, this isn't the same church. They don't know, and so, and it does come back to like, if they don't know Jesus, though, none of this really even matters too. But there is that, I'm feeling that emphasis a little bit, like that unction to kind of like, oh, some of these people kind of need to be taught, or like need the permission, or, other things like that. So I think I'm feeling that come up again, though, for sure.
I think that's everywhere right now, Kyle. Okay, let me ask you this, since we've touched on some of this. How big is your song universe? Do you have one? I don't even know.
We do. I don't actually know the number.
I'll give you just roughly, just guess. You don't even have to pull it up. Is it 50? Is it 20? Is it 100?
I would say it's since COVID, it is for sure under 40.
I like that. Way to be.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's a goal. For me, that's a gold star. So that means you do repeat a lot of songs a lot.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's great. I think that's so helpful. How long is your worship time at Urbana? On a Sunday? On
a Sunday, so we kick off the service with one song. We call that the call to worship, and then message and all that. And then we have 22 minutes for 3 songs. So when you break down an average of 22 divided by 3, I don't know, I'm good at math anymore.
A little over 7.
But, there's room in there for sure. And we definitely have, and even we have 30 minutes for the message. That's how much we have for the message. And it's very like team here, to where it's like, hey, if the preacher goes long and, obviously Spirit was on it, they'll either cut their ministry a little bit after worship, or worship team will cut a little bit. And it goes hand in hand. So like I've done sets where I love that I feel the authority, the permission, like I've gone 35 minutes and, they bless that. So we have timers, but it's when the Spirit is doing stuff, it's a little bit hard, but that's what we have.
No, I love that. I mean, I actually think we all need some structure, and then we need the ability to at times push against it, right? Mm-hmm. A little flexible. Let me ask you this: how many new songs a year do you introduce?
The goal is 10 to 12.
Yeah. So one a month?
So roughly once a month. And I would say we don't hit that most months. So we're probably do 8 a year if I had to guess.
Yeah. Okay. And when you do introduce a new song, How do you do it? You play it like 2 or 3 times in a row and then give it a week off? What do you do?
I feel it out depending on if the song is on the radio, or I do things strategically too, where I will have them play the song in the PA during the countdown, stuff like that, just to like, people don't even know they're hearing it, but they've heard it kind of thing.
Yeah, of course.
But typically, when in doubt, I do it two weeks in a row and then a week off. And then I will most likely do it that third week.
Yeah.
And then from there, it kind of just depends. And I've discovered that it really helps if it's more than one voice leading the song. So if like I lead it, I would want someone else on the team to lead it. And then maybe I lead it for that third time we do it. But even if someone else leads it, that's where I've seen, air quotes, the most success.
I believe that. I totally believe that. Do you have support staff, Kyle?
I do. Within worship specifically, I have an admin, and she's roughly 5 hours a week. So she kind of just does a lot.
Yeah. So what are her main responsibilities?
So we do a lot of things together as far as like decisions and stuff. Like I like to have her input on a lot of things, but she is the one that is like reaching out to people for like dates and availability, even for our main Sunday morning rotation.
She's schedule building.
Yep. And then we do a lot of events randomly throughout the week. And so if we do like a 5-week class on studying Luke, I don't know, something in the Bible, like if they want 2 songs of worship every week, then her and I will talk about, let's give this person a shot. Let's throw them in there. And then she's reaching out to them. So it's like multiple schedules too. And then the other big thing is that she does a lot of the admin and organization we do team nights, which is worship team hangout type things. Do those probably, like 6 a year. So bi-monthly, and she coordinates all that.
How many people are on your team?
It depends. Are you talking about the whole, like we call it the worship community.
Yeah.
So then it's like, not just if you serve on Sunday morning in the main auditorium, we have like, it's all the venues. So if we're talking about the main auditorium, like the team that I primarily work with for adult services, I would say we're right under 30.
What about your tech crew? When you do those team nights, does your tech crew come as well?
They come to like 1, maybe 2 a year.
Gotcha.
So like, they do their own kind of get-togethers too. But sometimes we combine them, which is cool. And then, but the team nights it's for the whole worship community, and that's like around 60 people.
That's great. And do most people come?
No.
So you get about half? What do you get?
It kind of depends on the day of the week, what's going on, what we're actually doing. So, if we're going bowling, 15 might come, I don't know.
Yeah.
It just depends. And I think it depends on how many things I say. Like if I'm like, hey, you need to come to this, like this is an important one, it just depends. But I just don't want anyone on the team to be like, hey, I have no community, or I have no things to go to, or I don't feel like, because like I'm like, I just want them to have things that they can, like, I want them to feel a part of something. I want them to have friends and connections and stuff like that. And within the worship umbrella specifically, it's like, get around other worshipers and, hang out outside of church. So the main thing is just providing a space for that. And then one a year will be more like vision for myself. And I like to do that typically at the beginning of the school year. So around August, we're in a university town. So just a lot of new faces come through. That's when we do auditions and all that stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So how much time do you spend on non-musical stuff related to your job? Maybe even just like admin, working on this other stuff, one-on-one meetings, that kind of thing.
A lot.
Yeah.
A ton. Yeah. I would say most of it. Like musically, if I'm wanting to introduce new songs, or like I will kind of give the team a heads up. I'm like, hey, these are 3 or 4 songs that I feel like in the coming months we should lean into. And so I like to be definitely comfortable with those, or like new things and stuff. But outside of like any songwriting, anything, there's not a lot that I do musically on the weekly basis. It's a lot of, especially now that Easter's done, I feel like I have so much more headspace. Like I'm scheduling meetings.
Yeah.
And, meetings, I'm not, one-on-one pastoral type meetings, they don't necessarily bring me the most life, but I'm like, man, I can knock these out, man. Let's meet, let's connect, let's get together. And so there's a lot of that right now. And I'm loving it, to be honest, though.
That's good. A lot of times when you're a worship leader at a smaller or maybe even a medium church, you kind of have to be a utility player. So you need to be able to lead worship. You need to be able to maybe play bass. You need to learn how to fix the sound system and run the slides. I would assume that's not exactly your situation. Let me just ask you this, Kyle. Do you know anything about running sound in your big room?
That's funny. I did 2 soundboards ago, maybe.
Yeah, 2 soundboards ago, you knew.
Yeah, I think it was 2 soundboards ago. So yes, and I was on the rotation at one point, like serving on sound, and I was under someone's wings, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely different. What was your question within that? Like,
well, I guess what I'm getting at here is, in smaller and medium churches, there's this utility player / generalist need. And a lot of times at larger churches, that's not the case, and you become much more of a specialist, if I could say that. Your role is like Sunday morning, great worship leading, and then creating hopefully a culture of friendship and connection inside your worship community and the people who are around you. But I'm just trying to get at how much of that utility stuff still persists.
Oh, okay.
Do you ever have to fix the slides? Do you ever have to fix the worship soundboard in the youth room? Or is somebody else covering that, and you're free to just really dig in on being the best Sunday morning worship leader you can be?
I'm tracking with you now. Yeah. So I definitely, I would say I know that I don't want to say struggle. I know that grind.
Yeah.
So in the short few years that I did that at our campus, I was 100% wearing those hats.
Yeah.
And, even before we had a building that was like our space, we met in a bar, which was fun. It was cool. We met in this bar, and we had once a month church services in this bar. And it was a full blown setup where I'm gathering a little team, and I'm like, hey, you get the speakers, you get the speaker stands, get the soundboard, get the projector screen, all that stuff. And it was like the full blown thing. And then when I'm leading worship, the soundboard's to my left.
Yeah. And, you're there running sound.
I'm in between strums when I'm done. Person comes up to do ministry. I'm unmuting the handheld mic.
Yeah.
In between strums. So like, I know that grind. And I would say the shift now I don't want to say it's harder, because it's not harder in my world.
Yeah.
But it is hard because it's not in my hands. And so I had to learn how to trust the team to get that kind of stuff done. And that's the team that I oversee outside of worship is production. Like I oversee the production director and communications and all that stuff. And so when things aren't right, I may not be the person manually fixing it.
Yeah.
But I'm like hoping they catch it and I don't have to say anything or anything like that. So it's an interesting but similar struggle, but it's like, oh, I can't fix this myself.
Well, here's what you're putting your finger on, Kyle. You're dividing here between the hard skills and the soft skills of leading worship, right? So when you're at maybe smaller churches, you need more of those hard skills of, I know where to plug this into to get sound out of these speakers. And if Pro Presenter stops working, I know how to fix the computer, right? But now as your church has gotten bigger and you're in this different role, now what you need are the soft skills of communication and, we'll use this, for lack of a better phrase, corporate structure, just the flow chart of who reports to who and whose responsibility and how do we have this conversation. And just like you said a moment ago, did they catch that something was wrong? Am I the first person who's telling them all of that kind of stuff? So
yeah, dude, it's
just a whole it's a whole new thing to learn, isn't it?
Soft skills, man. Yeah. Let's go.
So hard.
Teach me, Lord, please.
Teach me, Lord. Kyle, this is something I've been asking everybody in this little series. What kind of songs resonate with your church and your room? And I have this little theory about certain songs just resonate anywhere. You could play them at a home group of 5, or you could play them at the Chiefs Stadium with 80,000 people and the song works, right? But then there's other songs that just seem to fit rooms in different kinds of ways. Part of what I'm thinking here, I'll just get real specific. Like a Ryan Delmore song, like one of the things I've learned over the years is like a Ryan Delmore song is going to, it works in lots of different places depending on how you contextualize it, but it'll just kill a church of 150 or 200 people. Like it'll just blow that room up. It just fits in a way that there's something about it, right? And I guess I'm just wondering, when you have a room that's maybe, like you said, maybe 1,000 people on a Sunday morning all together, all those different life stories coming together, what kind of songs tend to work in your room? I'm imagining something that's big, something that's epic, but I don't know. You say.
100%. I would say people love songs in our context. It feels like songs that really tell a story.
How so? What kind of, like, what do you mean?
I think of like songs like of the cross. So like a song that comes to mind is All Hail King Jesus. Like it talks about where we were, essentially, Easter weekend. It's like there was a moment and it's horrible.
Yes.
But, he rose, he's victorious. So like, I would say any song that like takes people on a journey in a way, like, people just get excited, man.
Really?
And then, when they do, then other people are like, oh, what's going on? Like, and, then collectively it's like, oh, I would say like just those songs that have like octave jumps, which I think, I think that season might be coming to a little bit of close.
Yeah.
And I would say for sure, like you can get away more with octave jumps, like in a bigger setting, almost easier for sure. Like an acoustic, like in small group, I'm not going to lead in the octave jump songs.
It's weird,
like,
right?
It's like, so I would say songs about that kind of tell a story, if that makes sense. And then,
it makes a lot of sense.
I feel like our church, we love singing about Jesus and the cross and what he's done. Yeah. And me as a leader, I love singing songs of high praise. And so to a level, it's like, well, I don't know if it's their favorite, but we're singing it,
I've got the microphone and the guitar this morning. This is what we're doing. Okay, this is something else I've asked everybody. Talk to me about the high Christian holidays, Christmas and Easter at your church. Is that a big deal?
For sure. I would say it's still a huge deal. I would say before I was in the role, the previous worship pastor is very gifted at had a theater background, very musical background, and like schooling and stuff like that. So I think that had a influence on even sometimes how we did certain services like that. And they were always really epic, to be honest. And, they would have actors and actresses and dances and stuff like that. So it was very, very cool. And I would say we still have like elements of that, but I would say it leans more now on like, to put it in a nutshell, I want it to reflect how a normal Sunday would be. Like, I don't want people to like come on Easter and have this crazy, crazy show or whatever. Not show, that I didn't actually mean it like that.
Yeah, of course. Just like a lot going on.
Yeah, have this service, but then come back the next week and it's like, this is a totally different church. And so I basically view it as like, we are just going to be putting all of our energy and making everything how we do things, but just putting it at the highest level we can do it. And so there's more rehearsals and everything's very, very much so thought out. And there might be a testimony video and that, that just involves a whole lot of prep work and pre-work and stuff like that. So I would say just like, it's just a lot more time and resources that go towards it for sure.
Okay. So on Christmas Eve, how many services do you have to do?
Oh, we've been doing 2.
Oh, okay. There you go.
But that's because I think because of COVID. I mean, I think, for Easter we did 2 as well. And I would say next Easter we might not be able to do that. And so it was pretty full. Yeah.
We here this Easter, our staff and I, we wrestled for 4 weeks whether or not to do 3 services. And we opted for 2 and then we rented a giant wedding tent. We put it out back and put the kids in it, and it was the only thing that saved us. If we had not done it, we would have melted.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I mean, Christmas, you can kind of get away with weird service times.
Yeah.
But for Easter, it's like, man, we're eating during lunch. I mean, we're singing during lunch or whatever.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, I get that struggle.
Yeah. So what do you guys think you'll do next year at Easter? You just going to get up real early? You going to do an 8 a.m. service? What are you going to do, Kyle? What are you going to do?
I don't want to think about it. We might go acoustic only at 7:30.
Yeah.
I don't know.
7:30 acoustic only, no families. He's risen.
For sure. Leave your kids at home.
Yeah. Oh, that's good, dude. So good. Well, listen, Kyle. Hey, man, thanks for jumping on this pod with me today. Thanks for just sharing your experience. I mean, I love your heart, and man, I just learned a lot listening to you today.
Oh, thanks, man. It's always an honor to be on this and talking with you, and I just hope people can take something and apply it. That's definitely the heartbeat for sure.
No question. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Peace.
Hey everyone, Casey Corum here, producer of the podcast. Thanks for listening. As always, if you've been enjoying the podcast, here's a few ways you can help us. First of all, leave us a review on the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Also, connect with us on social media. Instagram at the Ferment Podcast and Twitter at FermentCast. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. See you next week. Peace.